Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news around Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. It is fascinating to hear what they were talking about, as well as how they spoke in their articles from over 100 years ago. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the articles from this week in 1920. Hastings people soar over road and bridge conditions in this territory. The recent pilgrimage of T.R. Goodwin and L.A. Braswell to St. Augustine to lay before the county commissioners the facts regarding the condition of the sand road to Federal Point has resulted in a storm of road complaints from all parts of Hastings. The greatest grievances appear to center, as they have for months, around the road berms and the fact that the state road officials failed to do anything to improve them for the potato season, although frequent promises were made that the berms would be improved. Even more criticized than the berms, however, are the bridges in this general vicinity. Deep Creek Bridge in particular is cited as a horrible example of neglect, incompetence, or a combination of both. That bridge was rebuilt to 5/8 or more of its length and then apparently abandoned, the old portion daily falling into worse and worse dilapidation. For some time, it's been necessary for cars to cross that portion of the bridge with the greatest possible care. Not only has it been shaky in the extreme, but holes and bumps have rendered it even more unsafe. An explanation of the condition has been stated that the bridge was left unfinished because of the impossibility of obtaining men to complete the work. Spud shipments are falling off. The virtual winding up of the potato season, which is now in progress, begins to show a general letdown in the tension which has been evident in this vicinity for weeks past. While shipments of potatoes are yet being made and will continue to be made for several weeks to come, they will grow lighter daily. What remains is largely late stuff or patches where the digging has been delayed for one reason or another. The payments are to come slowly, but it will probably not be until next week that many of the local shippers will be in shape to know definitely just how they have finished the season financially. That the majority have made money cannot be denied. What remains to be discovered is exactly how much money they've made. Latest returns from the state. From a mass of state election returns scattered from Pensacola to Key West, Senator Duncan Fletcher has swept the state, defeating Governor Katz by more than 2-1. Carrie A. Hardy has been nominated governor, receiving nearly twice as many votes as his two opponents. We'll start summer closing. Beginning with Thursday of next week, the local stores will begin the observance of the annual season of summer half holidays. All local stores will close at 1 o'clock on Thursday and will continue closing each Thursday throughout the entire summer season. It is possible, although no definite notice to that effect has yet been made, that later in the season, the closing time will be changed to include the entire day of Thursdays instead of merely the afternoon. Now it's time for Talk of the Times. Last week, we heard some of the stories that were published in the paper from John Francis Tenney, who was celebrating his 90th birthday this month in 1920. Tenney was one of the first residents of the area, who bought much of the land on Federal Point just after the Civil War. He talked about what the area was like in the years just after the war, and his stories from the newspaper read, St. Augustine had not been injured during the war, but viewed from a modern standpoint, a more unsanitary city could not have been found. The streets were narrow, with narrower back streets into which were dumped all the garbage and refuse of the inhabitants, and this, together with other unsanitary surroundings, would today condemn it as being unfit for human habitation. Palatka at that time was virtually deserted, its one street having grown up to dog fennel as high as a man's head. During the winter, however, the former residents began to drift back, and soon the firm of Teasdale and Reed put in a small stock of merchandise and reopened for business. At the time of his settling here, there were 3 orange groves in this section, 2 at Orange Mills and 1 at Hart Point, opposite Palatka. One of Mr. Tenney's earliest tasks was to construct a wharf and clear land for an orange grove. Soon his operations began to attract other settlers who came to Federal Point to buy land and groves, most of which were destroyed in the freeze of 1895. There being no post office nearer than Jacksonville, the people who lived in the vicinity had their mail come addressed in care of those Palatka merchants for some time. At that time, no man could hold any government office unless he would subscribe to an ironclad oath to the effect that he had neither sympathy nor did anything for the cause of Southern Confederacy. As it was impossible to find anybody in this section who could take such an oath, Palatka was obliged to do without a post office until finally a young man named Dalton took the oath and was appointed postmaster. He kept the mail in a soap box for several months until finally an old man from the north came into this section, was appointed postmaster, and raised the office to the dignity of a few pigeonholes fixed up in a dry goods box, to the great delight and pride of the local residents. If you've ever wondered what parties were like in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Mr. Tinney played the fiddle, and once people knew that, he was always invited to take part in what they called kitchen junkets. A kitchen junket was an informal house party, consisting mainly of country dancing. Because in the past, the kitchen was often the largest room in the house and certainly the warmest, on the day of the junket, everything but the kitchen sink would be moved out of the room. The fiddler perched on a stool in the sink, safely out of the dancer's way, and the party was on. Here is Mr. Tenney's story about how the junkets went. It reads, "When a junket was to be held, notice would be sent out through the surrounding county, and people would come in from a distance of 20 miles or more. As there were no roads or bridges, the effort to get together was strenuous. The parties were large ones, people coming in from all parts of the county. The dresses of the ladies were made of calico, put together without the slightest regard for fashion, but in accordance with the individual taste of the wearer. As nobody could think of traveling home in the darkness because of the lack of light, the parties would last until daylight." I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to over 100 years ago. This week, as we head toward Flag Day, how about a song about Old Glory? But it's a song that was the focus of some controversy. I guarantee you know the chorus of this song, as I'm sure you sang it all the way back to your grade school days, but you may not know the verses. It was written by George Cohan in 1906 to be used in a musical about George Washington. Cohan came up with the song after he encountered a Civil War veteran from the Battle of Gettysburg. The man was holding a folded, worn-out American flag, and when he told Cohan, "She's a grand old rag," those words stuck with Cohan, and he penned a song with that title. But the title got a little pushback. People didn't like the flag being called a rag, so Cohan changed the name of the song to the one we know today. But let's go way back to that original version from 1906. Here's Billy Murray with "You're a Grand Old Rag."
Feeling comes a stealing and it sets my brain a-reeling when I'm listening to the music of a military band. Any tune like Yankee Doodle simply sets me off my noodle. It's that patriotic something that no one can understand. Way down south in the land of cotton, melody untiring, ain't that inspiring? Hurrah, hurrah, we'll join the Jubilee, and that's going some for the Yankees by gum. Red, white, and blue, I am for you. Honest, you're a grand old rag. You're a grand old rag. You're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true under red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast or brag. But should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the grand old rag. I'm no cranky, hanky-panky, I'm a dead square honest Yankee, and I'm mighty proud of that old flag that flies for Uncle Sam. Oh, I don't believe in raving, every time I see it waving, there's a chill runs up my back that makes me glad I'm what I am. Here's a land with 1,000,000 soldiers vast, if we should need 'em, we'll fight for freedom. Hurrah, hurrah, for every Yankee tar, and old GAR, every stripe, every star. Red, white, and blue, hats off to you. Honest, you're a grand old rag. You're a grand old rag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true under red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast or brag. But should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the grand old rag.